वल्लभा गिरिवरदारी यशोदनन्दन व्रजजनरञ्जन यशोदनन्दन व्रजजनरञ्जन यमुनतीरा वनचारि यमुनतीरा वनचारि जय राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी जय राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी। हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे जय प्रभुपदा जय प्रभुपदा शिव प्रभुपदा जय गुरुदेवा जय गुरुदेवा जय गुरुदेवा जय गुरुदेवा। जय विष्णुपाद परमहंस परिव्राजक श्री भक्तिवेदांत स्वामी श्री प्रभुपाद की जय। ISKCON संस्थापक आचार्य श्री प्रभुपाद की जय। जय विष्णुपाद परमहंस परिव्राजक श्री भक्ति सिद्धांत सरस्वती गोस्वामी महाराज प्रभुपाद की जय। जय विष्णुपाद श्री गौर किशोरदास प्रभु महाराज की जय। जय विष्णुपाद सच्चिदानंद श्री भक्तिवेदांत ठाकुर की जय। जय विष्णुपाद वैष्णव साधु श्री जगन्नाथ दास महाराज की जय। जय श्री रूप चंद्र भट्ट रघुनाथी जी गोपाल भट्टदास गोस्वामी प्रभु की जय। नमाचार्य श्री हरिदास ठाकुर की जय। प्रेम से श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत श्री साधु भक्तवृंद की जय। श्री राधा कृष्ण गोपिनाथ श्याम कुंड राधा कुंड के गोवर्धन की जय। श्री जगन्नाथ बलदेव सुभद्रा महेश दर्शन भगवान की जय। श्री मायापुर धाम की जय। श्री वृंदावन धाम की जय। कंकमई की जय। मनमई की जय। भक्ति देवी की जय। तुलसी देवी की जय। अनंत कोटि वैष्णव की जय। श्री हरिनाम संकीर्तन की जय। ग्रंथ श्रीमद् भागवतम की जय। ISKCON वर्तमान गुरु की जय। समागत भक्तों की जय। और प्रेमानंद हरि हरि बोल। All glories to the assembly. All glories to the assembly. All glories to the assembly. All glories to the Guru and Shri Governor. All glories to the Prabhupada. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya. Naram Chaiva Narottamam. Divim Saraswati Vyasam. Tato Jayamudiraye. नष्टप्रायेष्वभद्रेषु नित्यं भागवत सेवया भगवती उत्तमश्लोके भक्तिर्भवति नैष्टिकी। Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 14, Text 21. Navayam prabhavastam tvam anukartum griheshwari apyayusha va katsnyenha yechanye guna gritnavaha. Navayam prabhavastam tvam anukartum griheshwari apyayusha va katsnyenha yechanye guna gritnavaha. Navayam prabhavastam tvam anukartum griheshwari apyayusha va kartsnyenha ye chanye guna gritnavaha. Translation Srila Prabhupada ki jai. O Queen of the home, we are not able to act like you, nor could we repay you for what you have done, even if we worked for our entire life or even after death. To repay you is not possible, even for those who are admirers of personal qualities. So much glorification of a woman by her husband indicates that he is henpecked or is talking lightly in joke. Kashyapa meant that householders living with wives enjoy the heavenly blessings of sense enjoyment and at the same time have no fear of going down to hell. The man in the renounced order of life has no wife and may be driven by sex desire to seek another woman or another's wife and thus go to hell. In other words, the so-called man of the renounced order who has left his house and wife goes to hell if he again desires sexual pleasure, knowingly or unknowingly. In that way, the householders are on the side of safety. Therefore, husbands as a class cannot repay their debt to women, either in this life or in the next. Even if they engage themselves in repaying the women throughout their whole lives, it is not possible. Still not possible. Not all husbands are able to appreciate the good qualities of their wives. But even though one is able to appreciate these qualities, it is still not possible to repay the debt to the wife. Such extraordinary praises by a husband for his wife are certainly in the mode of joking. Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupakada Mahyam Tadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Udapatakamulam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Saganarkunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Satvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sagalalita Shri Vishakanvitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindho Dinabandho Jagatpade Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostude Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanuste Devi Panamami Haripriye Vanchakalpatarupesha Pasnudubhe Vacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaur Bhaktavrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Om Karute Vachala Pangam Lange Dekam Yatkapada Muhammad Shri Gurum Tirtha Paramatma Shri Chaitanya Shri. Hare Krishna. So I would like to welcome you all to this morning Sunday Bhagavatam, Tuesday Srimad Bhagavatam class. So here we see Kashyapa Muni is addressing his wife, Iti. O Queen of the home, we are not able to act like you, nor could we repay you for what you have done, even if we work for our entire life or even after death. To repay you is not possible, even for those who are admirers of personal qualities. So in the purport, Srila Prabhupada mentions about how Kashyapa Muni is glorifying his wife for her position in the Grihastha Ashrama. So there could be two reasons why he is glorifying. One is he is henpecked or he is talking lightly in a joke. So we will consider all these aspects today. Actually, Kashyapa Muni meant that householders living with wives in the Grihastha Ashrama enjoy the heavenly blessings of sense enjoyment. At the same time, they don't have a fear of going down to hell. Now, the point is that in the other ashramas, for example, Brahmachari, Vanaprastha, Sannyasi, having even a desire to have a sex with another's wife or another woman leads one to go to hell. Whereas in the Grihastha Ashrama, a man has got his wife with whom he thinks he can think that he can enjoy. but actually one must have a right understanding of what is a grihastha-ashrama, which we will discuss today. So that's why Kashyapa Muni feels that husbands cannot repay their debt to women either in this life or the next. The point is that actually in the grihastha-ashrama, a man and a woman, they are made up of so many different qualities. And in the Vedic system, the marriage was arranged such a way that the relatives would do a lot of groundwork on the background of the bride and the bridegroom, on the boy and the girl. And then if they find that both can go well, they may do a horoscope matching. And if the horoscope matches, then they proceed further for a marriage, which can turn out to be successful. But nowadays we see that nobody believes in horoscope matching. Nobody does the groundwork which was earlier done. And that is one of the reasons why many marriages are today not very successful. Because marriages are based on sense gratification than anything else. Now, one activity that is permitted in the grihastha-ashrama is sex. But the point is that one who should have a proper understanding why this activity is permitted in the grihastha-ashrama. It is permitted only in the grihastha-ashrama and it is subject to many conditions. Because it is not that just because one has entered into a grihastha-ashrama, he can engage in this activity as and when they feel like satisfying their senses. So one must understand what is the purpose. In grihastha-ashrama, one can enter into sexual activities purely for creating progeny, and that too under certain conditions. Whereas if we engage in sense gratification, then one is not a grihastha-ashrama, situated in the grihastha-ashrama anymore. He is called a grihamedi. So this is the first point that one should understand, that we are not sense enjoyers in this life. Not only in this life, in any life. But in the human form of life, one can come to the understanding that Lord Shri Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead and is the Supreme Enjoyer. And we are just like servants in the house. And though we may be thinking ourselves to be masters, we are all actually servants. And Krishna is the original master. Now, when it comes to this particular activity of sex life, Krishna himself says to Arjuna in Bhagavad Gita 7:11, he says, I am the strength of the strong, devoid of passion and desire. I am sex-like, which is not contrary to religious principles, O Lord of the Bharatas, Arjuna. The point is that Srila Prabhupada mentions in the purport, sex life according to religious principles, that is dharma, should be for propagation of children, not otherwise. And the responsibility of parents is then to make their offspring Krishna conscious. So if we are indulging ourselves in this activity, it is purely for the purpose of begetting children who are Krishna conscious and not otherwise, and not for sense gratification. There is a similar instruction given by Lord Krishna to Uddhava in the 11th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, 17th chapter, 33rd sloka, where he is explaining about the Varnashrama system. And he says, those who are not married, that is sannyasis, vanaprasthas and brahmacharis, should never associate with women by glancing, touching, conversing, joking or sporting. Neither should they ever associate with any living entity engaged in sexual activities. So from this we can understand that it is the most abominable activity that is there in this material world. And even in the grihastha-ashrama, it is permitted only under certain conditions, which we will discuss one by one. So the first thing is that we are not the enjoyers. Lord Shri Krishna is the supreme enjoyer. And the purpose of engaging in this activity is to create progeny who can be or who will be Krishna conscious. Otherwise, those who don't have this understanding of the goal of life, they suffer and the progeny also suffers, because the children who are born out of sense enjoyment, they need not be Krishna conscious, And looking at today's situation, to make somebody Krishna conscious is not very easy. It is very difficult. So if they don't become Krishna conscious, we are bound by that sense enjoyment, and the children are also bound in this material world. Whereas I think I quoted in the last week class, there is a nice instruction that is given by Lord Rishabdev in the 5th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, where he says, one who cannot deliver his dependents from the path of repeated birth and death should never become a spiritual master, a relative, a father, a husband, a mother, or a worshipable demigod. So that means one cannot become a father unless and until one can deliver his dependents, that is, his children, from the cycle of birth and death. And freeing one's children from the cycle of birth and death means engaging in them in Krishna consciousness and making them understand the purpose of human life. So one cannot even become a spiritual master or a father or a husband, a mother, or a worshipable demigod. So these are the instructions given by Lord Rishabdev, who was an empowered incarnation to his sons. So Grihasthasrama is a license, but it is a license that cannot be misused. So for which one requires to be a properly trained brahmachari. So unless and until one is properly trained in the brahmachari life, one cannot be and cannot become a successful grihastha shrama life. Now, there are many other things also which are the side effects. One is loss of memory. The other important point is reduced lifespan. So these are all very important aspects to be considered, should be considered by the men or the in the Grihastha Ashrama, and also the women also should have a proper understanding. In the earlier system, there was how system whereby those who enter the Grihastha Ashrama, they live up to a certain age of say 50 years in their home, and then they go on Vanaprastha. Now, these days this Vanaprastha system does not exist, but then one can live even in a home in a sort of a renounced order without even taking sannyasi, that is without attachment, which is very difficult to give up unless one is practicing Krishna consciousness, which is very true. We see it on a day-to-day basis. How many are there in the Grihastha Ashrama? They are attached to their children, their grandchildren, and so many things. So in this respect, there is a very nice quote given by Sri Narad Muni to King Yudhishthira in the 7th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. In the 14th chapter, sloka 2 to 4, the translation says, "My dear king," he is addressing King Yudhishthira, "those who stay at home as householders must act to earn their livelihood, and instead of trying to enjoy the results of their work themselves, they should offer these results to Krishna, that is Vasudeva." That means those who are in the Grihastha Ashrama must have to act to earn their livelihood. So first and the foremost, we must work, or whatever maybe based on our this thing, we must try to earn our living. And instead of trying to enjoy the results of work for our own self, we should offer these results to the Supreme Lord, Shri Krishna or Vasudeva. Now, how to satisfy Vasudeva in this life can be perfectly understood through the association of great devotees of the Lord. That means how to live even a successful Grihastha Ashrama life can be understood only from great devotees of the Lord. Now he gives a few more things. A Grihastha must associate again and again and again with saintly persons, and with great respect he must hear the nectar of the activities of the Supreme Lord and his incarnations, as these activities are described in Srimad Bhagavatam and other Puranas. So the duty of one in a Grihastha Ashrama is to hear the glories of the Supreme Lord and his incarnations as given in Srimad Bhagavatam and other Puranas from the pure devotees of the Lord. Thus, one should gradually become detached from affection for his wife and children, exactly like a man awakening from a dream. So when one hears this Krishna Katha, what happens is that he starts developing detachment from his family and other members, just like a man awakening from a dream. See, we all dream. We have so many dreams. When we dream, we feel, oh, I saw this, I saw that, I was becoming a millionaire, I saw that I was in a great palace, But when we get up, then the dream is gone forever. So similarly, in this material world, everything is like a dream. There is no truth. The ideal example of a husband and wife is given in Ramayana, where the Lord Rama acted as an ideal husband and then Mother Sita as the ideal wife. Now there is a pastime in the 11th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, 7th chapter, in the 52nd sloka onwards, where Lord Krishna is telling Uddhava about the affection that one normally develops when one is situated in a grihastha life. So he gives an example of a pigeon which lived in the forest along with his wife. So this pigeon, he built a very nice nest within a tree and lived there for several years in the company of his wife. Now, you see the intimacy or the attachment that a man develops to a woman or a male pigeon develops to a woman pigeon, they are all the same in all the species of life. So these two pigeons, the male and the female, were very much devoted to their household duties. And because first time they met each other, their hearts were tied up with a lot of sentimental affection. They started admiring each other's beauty, bodily features, and states of mind, and so forth. So only difference that between a man and other species of life is that a man might express in terms of nice, beautiful words, which we see here Kashyapa Muni is trying to glorify his wife. Whereas the birds, animals also, they have their own way of exchanging communication. We don't know, we are not into it, but they all have the same this thing. There is no difference. So these two birds, they were carrying out their activities of sitting, walking, standing together, conversing, playing, eating, and so forth, like any other happily married couple. And whenever the she pigeon would desire something, the male pigeon would try to gratify her senses by faithfully doing whatever she wanted. So this thing exists among the birds also. So thus, this male pigeon could not control his senses in her association. So over a period of time, the female pigeon experienced her first pregnancy, and when the right time came, she delivered a lot of eggs in the nest. They built a nice nest. Like the first time when a man and a woman get married, the first thing they think is how to live separately, have a nice house or palace or whatever it is, or a flat, whatever it is. So at the right time, they built this nest where they were living very happily. And when the time of this thing came, the female pigeon delivered a lot of eggs. And at the time of maturity, the eggs, baby pigeons were born to this female one with nice tender limbs and feathers. So this is how nicely Lord Krishna explains to Uddhava. So the two pigeons, that is the male and the female pigeon, they became very, very affectionate seeing their baby pigeons and took a lot of pleasure in hearing their chirping. And when we hear a child speak or murmur something, we all get attracted by the children trying to speak. So similarly, even both the male and the female pigeons, they got attracted to their baby birds chirping and making sound and all those things. So they began to raise these few birds that were there, that were born of them. The parent birds would become very, very joyful and happy by seeing the nice soft wings of their baby pigeon, their chirping, their lovely innocent moments and all those things. So seeing these baby pigeons happy, the elderly pigeons were very, very happy. Now, they did not realize that time was passing by. So one day, the two pigeons, the male as well as the female, they went out to bring some food for their children, baby pigeons. And because they were very anxious to feed this thing very properly, they wandered all over the forest for quite a long time. Now, this is what we also do. Like these days, we see a man and a woman working, and the child may be left at the mercy of a servant or whatever it may be. So at that time, when both these male and female pigeon went out hunting for food for their baby pigeons, the hunter came And he was going through the forest, and he saw in this tree a nest in which there were many young baby pigeons. So he spread out his net and he captured all these baby pigeons. Now, both the elderly pigeons, they came and they brought the food. But having brought that food, they suddenly saw that the baby pigeons have been caught by the hunter in his net. Then the lady pigeon thought, oh, all my baby pigeons have been trapped by this hunter in his net. So she was trying to be in anguish and was trying to cry. And then she thought that what is the point of my being alone here without my children? So she allowed herself due to that affection, she allowed herself, and she also, out of that, it is mentioned that being in the grip of the illusory energy of the Lord, she forgot herself and rushed towards her helpless children. Now the hunter had trapped already the baby pigeon and they were struggling. Now this female pigeon did not realize that she will also be trapped when she goes into the net. But she wanted to rescue her baby pigeon. And she knew it was very difficult. So seeing her children in more difficulty, the female pigeon rushed to the net, and finally she also got trapped. Now the poor male pigeon was thinking, he was lamenting actually. He was thinking, alas, just see how I am now destroyed. I am obviously a great fool, for I did not properly execute my pious activities. I could not satisfy myself, nor could I fulfill the purpose of my life. My dear family, which was the basis of my religiosity, economic development, sense gratification, is now hopelessly ruined. Of course, these are all expressions that he need not have as a pigeon, but then these are the realizations. My wife and I were an ideal match. She always faithfully obeyed me and in fact accepted me as her worshipable deity. But now seeing her children lost and her home empty, she has left me behind and gone to heaven. Now I am a wretched person living in an empty home. My wife is dead. My children are dead. Why should I possibly want to live? So this way, the male pigeon was lamenting. Then he thought, my heart is so pained by separation from my family that life itself has become simply suffering. As the father pigeon wretchedly stared at his poor children trapped in the net on the verge of death, pathetically struggling to free themselves, his mind went blank, and thus he himself went into the hunter's net. So the male pigeon was also thinking, what is the use of me living in a life like this, which is full of suffering? And finally, what happened is, the cruel hunter, having fulfilled his desire by capturing the head pigeon, his wife and all of their children set off for his home. In this way, one who is too attached to family life becomes disturbed at heart. Like the pigeon, he tries to find pleasure in mundane sex attraction. Busily engaged in maintaining his own family, the miserly person is fated to suffer greatly along with all his family members. So this example is given for us to understand, at least in this human life, that human life has got a purpose. What is that purpose? The doors of liberation are open wide to one who has achieved human life. But if a human being simply devotes himself to family life, like the foolish bird in the story, then he is to be considered as one who has climbed to a high place only to trip and fall down. See, the thing is that it is possible to understand the purpose of life only in the human form of life. Why? Because other species of life like birds and animals, we see what has happened. This is what happens. And in the higher species, like in the form of demigods, so they are all so much involved in sense enjoyment in the heavenly planets that they hardly have time to think over. So that is why it is said that the human form of life is very, very precious, where one can understand the importance of life. So it is said in the Shastras that attachment to a woman is the most complete form of resultant bondage and infatuation. The whole material world is running on sex attraction. The entire material existence and forms of bodies are created to satisfy the soul's desire to enjoy separately from God. And the pleasure of sex is the highest, which is the entangling for the spirit soul. So this sex, what we discussed, is actually given to a jiva to understand that because he doesn't want to enjoy with Krishna, this alternative has been given so that he can think that he can enjoy, but actually he is not enjoying, but he is suffering. So this is the condition of anyone who is remaining in the Grihastha Ashrama and becoming attached to women. It is said that one time during Srila Prabhupada's time, Srila Prabhupada used to travel many places to do preaching work, and he asked the devotees to look for a place for preaching. So they went around, and one devotee, he saw a nice place which was there, which he thought would be fit for preaching. And he brought Srila Prabhupada to this particular place. And though it looked a bit old, but when Srila Prabhupada tried to enter that place, a small rat came out of a shelf. Immediately Srila Prabhupada said, this is what happens when one is too attached to his family and his possessions. Now this person, Srila Prabhupada said, was a landlord of this place. But because of his too much attachment to his possessions and because of his karma, he had to take the body of a rat in the same place. And he said, similarly, there is a mention, he also mentioned that if a person is very wealthy, but too much miserly, then he takes the body of a snake. So many times we see people are very, very wealthy, but they don't want to spend money. So they will get the body of a snake. Whereas this example of the rat shows that he was too much attached to his family and possessions and things like that, and he had to take the body of a rat. So human form of life is meant to understand that it is meant for spiritual advancement and going back to Godhead. And if it is misused, then one will degrade to lower species of life, as we discussed now. Now, there are other things, repercussions that happens due to engaging in sexual activities. One is less memory as compared to brahmacharis or brahmacharis. See, anyone who engages in these activities for sense gratification, they will always lose their memory compared to those who are practicing celibacy. So that is why it is said that only one who has been trained perfectly as a proper brahmachari can enter into Grihastha Ashrama, live successfully as a successful Grihastha, and then he can even go to Vanaprastha, or even in the Grihastha life, he can live a proper life with proper understanding. Now, the point is that every Varna or Ashrama, the Lord has created this Varnashrama system for the benefit of the Jivas like us. And each and every ashrama has got their own advantages and disadvantages. We might think from this verse that, oh, Grihastha Ashrama is very safe. But then it is also said that spiritual advancement in Grihastha Ashrama is not very, very easy. It is also difficult. So unless and until one becomes detached and becomes serious in Krishna consciousness, not only that one should become Krishna conscious, but also make his family Krishna conscious. That is not only the husband, but wife, children, everybody should be brought into the platform of practicing Krishna consciousness. That is why it is said one should not become a father or a mother unless one can deliver that, dependent from the cycle of birth and death. So we must become free from the cycle of birth and death and see that our children don't become victim of this cycle of birth and death. And that can happen only by understanding the purpose of life. So today, see, even if you have one child, it is very difficult to bring them up in today's situation. As Kali Yuga is progressing, we see today with this pandemic, we have wear mask. If we go out, children have to wear mask for going to school. So many problems are there. So like that, it is not that Grihastha Ashrama is very safe. Yes, to a certain extent, it may be safe, but it's got its own implications. Earlier, families used to live together as a joint family. They used to, the husbands used to go out, the wife used to take care of the children and so many things. But today, because of the unfortunate situation, both the husband and wife go out and they try to stay separately somewhere. The children are left out, they are ignored, and children face so many problems today in the society. So I'll give some few references. In the 6th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, when Yamaraj is speaking to the Yamadutas, he gives some instructions. He says, Paramahamsas, this is from 6.3, 28 and 29. He says, Paramahamsas are exalted persons who have no taste for material enjoyment and who drink the honey of the Lord's lotus feet. I mean, those who are, these are generally those in the renounced order of life. Then he says to Yamadutas, my dear servants, bring to me for punishment only persons who are averse to the taste of that honey, who do not associate with Paramahamsas and who are attached to family life and worldly enjoyment, which form the path to hell. So Yamaraj is telling his Yamadutas to bring those who for punish all those jivas for punishment who are averse to the taste of that honey. What is that honey? Who do not associate with Paramahamsas but are attached to family life and worldly enjoyment, which forms a path to hell. That means those who are attached to family life, they are definitely heading towards hellish conditions. Then he says, my dear servants, please bring to me only those sinful persons who do not use their tongues to chant the holy name and qualities of Krishna. That means he is telling the Yamadutas, bring me those jivas who do not use their tongues to chant the holy name of Krishna and his qualities, and whose hearts do not remember the lotus feet of Krishna even once. That means those who don't remember Krishna even once, and whose heads do not bow down even once before Lord Krishna. That means the moment we see a picture or a deity of the Lord, we are supposed to bow down and offer obeisances. Then he goes on and says, send me those who do not perform their duties towards Vishnu, which are the only duties in human life. Please bring me all such fools and rascals. So Yamaraj is telling Yamadutas that bring me those jivas who do not perform their duties towards Vishnu, which is the only duty in human life. That means human form of life is meant to understand, to have an understanding that whatever activities we perform, it must be offered to Krishna or Vishnu. Now, why household Grihastha is a safe ashrama that is meant here is that between husband and wife, if they are not able to control their senses, they may engage in the activity, but only for creating progeny, which is Krishna conscious, by which the children can be delivered and they also are delivered. And they can be free from entering the hellish planets. Otherwise, falling down from a position of any ashrama, if a brahmachari is not able to practice celibacy, it's a fall down for him. If a sannyasi does not practice, it is a fall down for him. But similarly, even in Grihastha ashrama, if one is not able to live a successful Grihastha life, then it is a fall down for him also. And then, actually, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakura in his commentary on this particular sloka mentions that maybe Kashyapa Muni might be buying some time because Diti was approaching him for sex, but Kashyapa Muni actually realizes that the time is not right or the time is not proper. So he's trying to glorify his wife and trying to buy time. Normally in English, they say buying time. So this could be one reason. It could be because Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakura's commentary. And not only that, the other implication is that it is also given in Srimad Bhagavatam that even if someone jokingly talks about sex life, it is said that that's the beginning of the activity. I mean, they say normally manasa vacha karmana. That means the thought process comes to the mind and then it comes to the talking and then finally the activity takes place. So any thought that has come into our mind will ultimately result into that activity. So that is why it is said that loose talks increase lusty affairs. That means talk about sex actually can increase lusty desire in a man or a woman. So it is said that another thought process on this particular sloka is that maybe Kashyapa Muni could have been much more serious, and it was his duty to correct his wife. And as we see here, because her senses were not controlled, and Kashyapa Muni gave in for that, the two demons, that is Hiranyaksha and Hiranyakashipu, were born. So that is why it is said that it is better to curtail this desire rather than becoming a victim of that. In the 5th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, Jadabharata is actually instructing, this pastime where Jadabharata was taking King Ravukana in the palanquin. At that time, he stops for a moment. And when he stops, King Ravukana gets angry, and in the process, he gives a lot of instructions. And in this particular instruction, I'll just read it out. What happens in a Grihastha life? He says, "O King Ravukana, in this forest of material existence, there are 6 very powerful plunderers." That means he says that this material life is like a forest. When the conditioned soul enters the forest to acquire some material gain, the 6 plunderers misguide him. So what happens is that normally the practice was that a person enters a forest to get some wealth. But what happens when he enters the forest? When the conditioned soul enters the forest to acquire some material gain, the 6 plunderers misguide him. Thus, the conditioned merchant does not know how to spend his money, and it is taken away by these plunderers. So we will see who are these plunderers. Like tigers, jackals, and other ferocious animals in a forest that are ready to take away a lamb from the custody of its protector, the wife and children enter the heart of the merchant and plunder him in so many ways. Now here it is little more detail. In a forest, there are many plunderers, dacoits, jackals, and tigers. The jackals are compared to one's wife and children. Here the jackals are compared to one's wife and children. Why? Because it is explained. In the dead of the night, jackals cry very loudly. And similarly, one's wife and children in this material world also cry like jackals. What they cry? What do the women and children cry? The children say, "Father, Father, this is wanted. Give me this. I am your dear son." This is true, isn't it? And when a father sees his offspring, a nice, beautiful son, he feels that, yes, you should oblige him by this or whatever the son asks for. Or the wife says, "I am your dear wife. Please give me this. This is now needed." So when a wife says in nice, attractive language, "I need this because I am your wife," then the father becomes, or the husband becomes, obliged to bring that. In this way, one is plundered by the thieves in the forest. Not knowing the aim of human life, one is constantly being misguided. So one who does not understand the aim of human life is constantly being misguided by wife and children. Everyone works hard to earn money, but no one knows that his real self-interest is in serving the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So our real goal in human life should be to serve the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Shri Krishna. Then he further explains, everyone works very hard to earn money, but no one, instead of spending money for advancing the Krishna conscious movement, one spends his hard-earned money on clubs, brothels, liquor, slaughterhouses, and so forth. And due to sinful activities, one becomes implicated in the process of transmigration, and thus one has to accept one body after another. Being thus absorbed in a distressed condition, one never attains happiness. So we all think that we can live happily, but we can never attain happiness, because for the example is given is that if we don't spend the money for Krishna conscious movement, we have to spend in other things like clubs or slaughterhouses or brothels and so forth. That is why it is said that a husband should be trained to be a successful brahmachari, and a wife should be trained to be chaste. That is why in the earlier years, the marriage took place at a very young age. They were not waiting for marriage like these days up to 30s and 40s to get married. Because when children were married at a very early age, they were ignorant and they were innocent. But what happens is that the marriages were successful. The wife was taught how to be chaste towards one's husband, and the husband was also having a proper understanding of life. But these values have fallen down, and that is why these days we see that most of the marriages end up in divorce, because as soon as the process of sense gratification is stopped, then what happens? It ends up in divorce. And some examples are given in the Shastras, like I gave the example of Lord Rama and his wife Sita Devi. They were the ideal husband and wife. Some more examples are given. it is said that, Pandu, when he left his body, there was a discussion between Queen Kunti and his other wife Madri, because one of them wanted to give up the body and enter Sati. So there was a discussion between Queen Kunti and Madri, and finally it was decided that Kunti Devi will take care of all the children, all the Pandavas, and so Madri took to Sati. There is one example which I gave in the last class also about Vindhyavali, who was the wife of Bali Maharaj. Bali Maharaj was arrested by Vaman Dev. Initially, she was a little bit upset, but then at the same time, because she was a true wife, she was very happy that the Lord had arrested him and taken away everything from him. Why? Because she realized that he will go back to Godhead. Because if he has got all the opulences, in fact, she was telling that Bali Maharaj had falsely claimed proprietorship for what actually he belonged to the Lord. So Bali Maharaj was actually thinking that whatever belongs to him actually belongs to him and not to the Lord. But she had the understanding that everything belongs to the Lord. And she said it was an extraordinary mercy given by the Lord by taking away all his opulence. In fact, she was expressing that what Bali Maharaj gave to Vamandev was an illusion because everything belongs to Krishna. So she prayed that the Lord, then of course she later prayed to the Lord to release Bali Maharaj out of his costless mercy. Now in this sloka, the example, normally Srila Prabhupada always quotes that the husband should protect his wife. But in this sloka, we see that a wife can also protect her husband by helping him attain love of Godhead. It is a duty of a wife to equally contribute to progress in Krishna consciousness. If she helps her husband in progress in Krishna consciousness, she also gets the benefit of it. And also it becomes easier for her to train her children in Krishna consciousness. That is the true Grihastha life. And that is how it is said that in the earlier years, when the husband used to go out for work, the wife used to take care of the children, and the grandmas used to narrate stories from the scriptures, the pastimes of Ramayana, Mahabharata, and so forth, and engage the children in properly hearing these pastimes of the Lord. And the children were also grown up in God consciousness environment. And the wife was also growing up in a God conscious environment. So this is how the system was earlier, but unfortunately all these have collapsed. Actually, today is the disappearance day of a great personality in our Sampradaya called Lochan Das Thakura. I was just reading about him. I'll give you an example from his life. It is said that Sri Lochan Das Thakura was a great Vaishnava and disciple of Sri Narottam Das Thakura, whom we might have heard by now. So he got married at a very young age. But then he had a lot of interest in scriptural studies, and also he left his home at a very early age. So one day, after growing up a certain age, he went back to his village, and he had a lot of difficulty in locating, because after a long time he was going back to his village. He was married, but he had not met his wife for a very long time. So he went around searching, and in the process he saw a woman, and normally they cover their head with a sari and all those things. And he asked, "My dear mother," he didn't know that it was his wife. So he asked, "Where is this so-and-so's house?" And she said, "This way." And he went and he reached the house. And finally he realized that the person whom he had met on the way asking for direction was actually his wife. And thereafter, because he had already called her mother, "Where is the house of this so-and-so person?" Because he addressed her as mother, he treated her as mother throughout his life. So this is an example how women have to be treated. This is what Srila Prabhupada always has given, that husband has always to protect his wife. And in this particular sloka, it is mentioned that the wife protects the husband also. So it is a protection given by both of them to each other, and at the same time protecting their progeny from the cycle of birth and death. So this is what I thought are some of the important points in today's class. So with this, I conclude the class for the day. So the next few minutes, I can take some questions, comments, anything that you may be having.
Hare Krishna Prabhu Tandra Pranam.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, Dandavat Prabhu. Dandavat Prabhu.
Prabhu, like in the class, as you were saying that Krishna is the supreme enjoyer, and
Yes.
and what we think sex as it's not enjoyment, it's an suffering. So
Yes.
how do we understand this, Prabhu? Sex is like normally when a person have sex, they think it's an enjoyment, and you say it's suffering. So how do we understand that, Prabhu?
Because this is the core verse which I quoted from Bhagavad Gita is there in the 7th chapter, 11th sloka, where Krishna says that I am sex life that is not against dharma. That means actually Krishna has given the facility for us to understand that yes, if you want to have, you have. There is no problem. But beget children. And the thing is that there are certain things like, for example, during Srila Prabhupada's time, see, there's one important point that which I forgot to mention, that even for sex life, one has to perform the activity under the guidance of a spiritual master. So one has to accept, one is a wife who is favorable to Krishna consciousness, and one has to depend on sadhu, shastra, and guru. So guru lives by sadhu and shastra. I mean, guru is a sadhu himself, and he lives by shastra. So one has to seek guidance from spiritual master, and he gives a proper guidance as to how to engage our grihastha life in Krishna consciousness. And then one has to take permission from the spiritual master to engage in that activity. So when one becomes engaged in Krishna consciousness, automatically one loses his taste for the sex life, which we are all thinking that we are enjoying, but it's actually binding us. So that can be realized only by sincerely practicing Krishna consciousness. If one is not mature in Krishna consciousness, then it is possible he can still think that I'm enjoying, but actually it is not, it's a binding. So that is why one has to accept the spiritual master, take guidance from him, and spiritual master guides as to when you must, for example, during Srila Prabhupada's time, I think, yes, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakura's time, he instructed all his disciples to chant 64 rounds. But Srila Prabhupada realized that it is not possible now. So at least he was insisting on chanting of the 16 rounds. So even in a grihastha life, if you practice your Krishna consciousness properly, and if you engage in the activity, then what happens is that children who are born from that activity, they are very easily they take up the process of Krishna consciousness. This is the advantage of practicing Krishna consciousness and engaging in the activity. Srila Prabhupada never said don't do anything. No, you can have as many engage in the activity, but have Krishna conscious children. That's all Srila Prabhupada said. So if you want, you can engage in the activity, have 10, 20, 100 children if you want, which was the practice before. People used to have many children, but they were all happy, isn't it? In the yesteryears, families did not have one child. Today we see many couples don't want to have child because they can't afford, or they feel that the society is not good enough for a decent child to be take birth. But during those days, I'm talking about even our generation, people had a lot of children, but they were all God conscious. But today what has happened is that the generation after that have become deprived of God consciousness. People are becoming more anti-God conscious, isn't it? So that is what is bringing the suffering to human beings. And this understanding was there earlier in all the grihasthas who are entering in the grihastha ashrama. But now nobody has got that understanding. I don't know whether I answered your question, Prabhu.
Yes, Prabhu. What I understood is like this sex life, what we have, it binds us, like, and moreover, it's like maybe we enjoy for some time, and it's not a permanent enjoyment.
Yes.
Is it right, Prabhu?
Yes. Very true.
And Prabhu, one more, like,
yes,
I've just was reading this Bhagavatam, this Ramayana, like during Treta Yuga, and even in Dwapar Yuga, when Rama came from killing Ravana to Ayodhya, and it's mentioned in Bhagavatam, like even prostitutes were there welcoming Rama, and even in Dwarka, like even in Krishna times, in Dwarka, there were prostitutes. So
yes.
How do you understand prostitutes there, Prabhu? Like how it's related, like any idea?
Actually, prostitutes were there in the previous ages also, but they were not engaged in the sense gratification process like what is happening in this yuga. Now in this yuga, what is happening is that the husband and wife, as long as they feel that there is some sense gratification between them, they practice, and then the moment they feel that the sense gratification is not there, then it is resulting in divorce. But during those days, I'm actually I'm not able to explain the position of the prostitutes in those ages, but prostitutes were existing even those ages. But I suppose they may be trying to enjoy if the wife has left body, or maybe something like that. It is possible. But whatever it is a sinful activity. Anything that is performed for sense pleasure is a sinful activity. Lord has provided so many things to us, but we must understand why he has provided us these things. Because we have a desire to enjoy. In fact, there is this thing, Krishna, the word Krishna comes from the word Karshan, that is one who is attractive. Krishna is originally attractive, but we have developed a sort of an independent desire to enjoy separately from Krishna. So that is why he has given all these things as an illusory form. See if you can enjoy. But we are not able to enjoy. All that pleasure that is there in the material world is temporary. That's why there is nothing that it gives an eternal happiness or pleasure in this material world, excepting devotion service. Am I correct? Those who have entered devotion service can realize the pleasure out of devotion service and the pleasure that is there from other activities.
Yes, Prabhu, very much right, Prabhu.
Yeah.
And Prabhu,
so
moreover,
in the earlier days, there was Gurukula, where all these training were being given to brahmacharis, and the girls used to learn at home how to be chaste to one's husband. But these things have vanished gone over a period of time. And that's why the values don't exist anymore. Today, there is no Gurukula which is trying to explain. Rather, the schools are projecting TV, promoting TV, and so many things which promote illicit sex, isn't it?
Yes, Prabhu, very much right, Prabhu.
So many serials are there in the TV today that make the children attractive toward those serials. And
nowadays, like Prabhu, we cannot even sit with our children and watch the TVs and the movies and whatever it is. Like it has become, as you said, when if you go to travel on the road, also you can see some pictures and other things, and even some talks also. This is, every step we can find that people are interested in the sexual activities only, Prabhu.
Yes, very true.
So I feel the whole this thing is totally on depending on the sex, this thing, isn't it?
Yes, that is true. Very true.
So Prabhu, like as you said, we should have sex only for generating Krishna conscious children, otherwise we should not. So why is it that few, like it's not been very clearly said by our this one ISKCON leaders? Like some give the privilege, okay, you can have sex with your wife if at all she wants, like, there's not a borderline, like as you said very rightly, that we have to ask the guru, and as I understand that guru also says you have to do 50 rounds of japa before having the sex and something like that. But so there are in some lectures I have heard that, okay, if at all, like if the wife is interested, like if at all, if it's uncomfortable, you can have, it's okay, and reduce, minimize it. So how do we borderline this problem?
See, there is nothing like a borderline. You have to create your own border. There are so many couples in Krishna consciousness who are living a happy life. So sometimes if a wife has got a desire, you can try and satisfy her, but make her understand that this is the ultimate this thing. So it's okay. In the sense, once in a way, trying to engage in activity once in a way may be different, but that's not what is happening these days, isn't it?
Yes, Prabhu. Yes, Prabhu. Right.
So the border is something that one has to create for his own self. Krishna has given the freedom to you, but how do you create the border? Where do you create the border? It's up to you. If you want, you can live without it. If you want, you can live with it with a proper understanding. Prabhupada never stopped, but he said that you can have 100 children if you want, if you can maintain them.
But it should not be like mechanical, Prabhu. Like it should be only for progeny of Krishna conscious children.
Yes,
Not
yes.
like that one uses it when will and wish.
Yes, yes, true. So that can come only if one enters a Gurukula where they teach proper education and one starts practicing. And this practicing of Krishna consciousness actually begins with chanting the holy name of the Lord. So actually there is a nice quote which I had where Yamunacharya quotes. I might have heard in many of the classes where Yamunacharya says, yeah, once again. Sri Yamunacharya, since I have been engaged in the transcendent loving service of Krishna, realizing ever new pleasure in him, whenever I think of sex pleasure, I spit at the thought and my lips curl with distaste. So the moment we engage in Krishna consciousness, automatically we develop a distaste for this activity. And it is said that Yamunacharya had formerly been a great king who enjoyed sexual happiness in various ways. But since he later engaged in the service of the Lord, he enjoyed spiritual bliss and hated to think of sex life. And if sexual thoughts came to him, he would spit with disgust. So see, we all have gone through this. But at least having known, yes, this is the truth, we must take the Krishna consciousness very seriously.
Prabhu, like why is that spiritual bliss we can't feel, Prabhu? Like I can't feel, not me, but it's like because when we get a higher taste, we leave the lower taste. So
Yes.
why is the taste is still like, it's I'm just trying I'm trying that where can I get the taste like in the holy name? So please will you help me?
You can taste the nectar of the holy name only through the association of devotees, not otherwise. We must look for association of devotees who are more mature than you. And it's like anything happens in this world with association only. So similarly, even in spiritual life, one should try and seek association with a genuine desire. The Lord will provide for it. As far as the Lord is seated in the heart as Paramatma, if your desire is genuine, definitely He will connect you to devotees with whose association you can release the chanting of the holy name also. And chanting is the beginning of the spiritual life, particularly in Kali Yuga, which you know.
Yeah, association of devotees means we listening to the lectures, Prabhuji, or
Listening to lectures and physical association also. Of course, you can't associate devotees. I don't know where you are placed and things like that. But in today's working condition, people go early in the morning. That's why it is said, actually, some references which I had, that one should not work very hard day and night in this material world to make money. Money is required. But if money is the only thing for which one is working very hard to sustain, then that understanding will not come at all. So if your desire is genuine, I need some better association, things like that, Lord will facilitate that also, where we can release the chanting of the holy name. But then it is a process that one has to start, and the desire has to be constantly there. Yes, I must progress in Krishna consciousness. I must mature in my chanting. I must mature in my proper understanding of the Shastras. That is why it is said that Sadhu, Shastra, and Guru, these three are very vital, important aspects of anyone's spiritual life.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Prabhu. Very much clear. Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Thank you very much. Anybody else? Any other questions, comments? If not, can I take the class and as closed and leave?
Prabhu, like it was a very wonderful class, Prabhu, very inspiring and very encouraging.
I've not spoken anything of my own. Whatever previous acharyas have spoken, I've tried to repeat the same thing through.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you all very much. Yes, Mataji. Hare Krishna, Mataji.
That sage, that man understood that the whom he asked for a way, he's a wife. Now he already said mother. Then what next, Prabhu?
Then what?
What happened next, Prabhu? He left that lady, Prabhu?
No, he addressed her as a mother and treated her as a mother. That's all. So how do you treat your mother? Like that he treated her. That's all. And he was very successful. He wrote one of the best books, that is Chaitanya Mangal.
Okay, Prabhu.
So that is why devotional service is so powerful, that if one wants to progress, God fulfills that desire also.
Hari Bol, Prabhu. Thank you, Prabhuji.
Thank you very much. Hare Krishna. Anybody else? Any other questions? Comments? Okay. Thank you all very much. Grantha Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Thank you,
Hare
Prabhuji.
Krishna,
Thank you all
Prabhuji.
very much.
Thank you, Prabhuji.
Thank you very
आप
much.
सभी
Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.
दंडवत प्रणाम प्रभुजी,
Dandavat pranam.
माता जी. हरे कृष्णा.